So, good afternoon, ladies and gents. On the latest episode of Turn It Around the Corner podcast, we are kindly joined by Matt Roper. Matt Roper is their editor and founder of the Pandemonium Fanzine. Is an actual Leyton Orient fanzine that's been running since 1991, covering all the trials and tribulations of the O's up and down the country for over 30 years. I think in the sort of history of fanzines, I think they're probably now in the top 4 or 5 longest running fanzines. And I wanted to speak to someone because I'm a football geek at heart. That's why I set up this podcast. And part of my going to games and matches was, I always bought a program. I collected a program, but I loved buying fanzines. When I Googled, what is a fanzine today, it kind of summed it up for me. It said the purchase of a fanzine remains part of the match day routine for many football fans who value an independent, sideways, and often light-hearted take on the state of their beloved football clubs. So, with that, Matt, welcome. If you could start by an introduction to yourself, and we'll get on to discussing, your beloved fanzine.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, been a Leyton Orient fan since 1978. First got taken by my dad when I was 6. So that's more years of hurt than a lot of people have had with England, put it that way. So, massive Leyton Orient fan. And then the fanzine, started, as you said, in 1991. And actually, the sort of Google or internet definition you've got of a fanzine is almost spot on. It's been a labour of love, for 33 years. And it's something I've really, really enjoyed. I've absolutely sort of loved every minute of it, being editor and founder of a fanzine that is now one of the longest running in the country.
How did you come about, Matt, from going to a game and probably like everyone else, as I've just touched on, buying a program and thinking, actually, I'd like a different viewpoint of this, or I'd like to do something different to, a program's run by the club. It's very, watered down. It's pretty samey content. What made you think, I'm gonna do something else? Was there a fanzine at the time that you took inspiration from? Like, what made you think I'm gonna do this myself in a little bit of a different way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was one of the fools that travelled to literally every game in the early 90s. And there was sort of a group of 4 or 5 of us that literally did every game home and away. Leyton Orient already had their fanzine Leyton Orient here, which is almost one of the longest running. So it's always a standing joke that Leyton Orient on the pitch, we're not that great, but in fanzine culture, we must be Champions League, because to have 2 going for 30 odd years plus has been sort of outstanding. So myself and a couple of mates and my next brother down from me, we've been talking in the early 90s about getting a fanzine going, and it was always one of the things you probably never actually thought was going to happen. And then, we suddenly went, come on, let's ramp it up. Let's get a fanzine going. And it actually started in around about sort of the second month of the season in 91, 92. Started in around about September 91. The sort of 4 of us plus myself sort of put it together monthly. Some great stuff in there and whatever. Probably, as I say, it's probably slightly different to the Orient here. Like I said, when you sort of read out what is a sort of a definition of a fanzine, fanzines, Christian, were probably like early fans' trust. There were some fans that were a bit disillusioned with clubs, and of course, you didn't have a fans' trust. You didn't have a supporters liaison. So the only way to sort of put your point across and have a bit of a say, if you like, was to do some unofficial 20 grand, which, the early ones, a lot of them were put together on office photocopiers and, some very, very sort of primitive typewriters and whatever. And then Orient here were always, I don't think they mind me saying, they were a little bit more political. They were a little bit more sort of fans trust side. Whereas our fanzine Pandemonium sort of was that sort of very light-hearted look, a little bit of a joke. You could take the mick out of your own club, have a little bit of a pop at some of our rivals, and like you say, just have a little bit of an independent look as to what Orient were doing on and off the pitch, and almost like we say, yeah, never the greatest club in the world, of course. So let's have a little bit of a laugh over it, because you'll be damn sure. Certainly, if you went to all the games like we did away from home, there was very few laughs on the pitch. So let's have a few laughs off of it.
So I think you touched on it a little bit. How did you go about getting that first episode out? You mentioned typewriters and photocopies. Obviously, the way of the world's changed massively, and we'll get onto that. But getting that first episode out and those early days, how did you do that? Like, how did you go about it? Was it beg, still,
The
and borrow?
first one was, the first one I did on an old Brother electronic typewriter. So you would literally type out a sentence, press return, and it would print off for you actually on the paper. The funny story goes, completely true. My we sort of put it out that we was bringing out the first issue. I really wanted to hit the deadline. That we didn't want to fail on that. And literally, my brother typewriter ran out of ink on the Sunday night before it was due to go to print. So we actually finished it by me typing up the last 2.5 pages on an old push button typewriter. And would you believe it? I was living in North London at the time. I didn't have a ribbon for that typewriter. And I had to drive to my aunt's in South London to get a typewriter ribbon. Finished typing it up at about 3 o'clock in the morning for it to go to my local printer in North London for the Monday morning, just to hit our deadline. So you can see it was, the first sort of 18 pages was on a sort of a very sort of, a slightly primitive but slightly better electronic typewriter. And the last 3 or 4 pages, great big fat bold type on a push button typewriter. So quite a sort of quite a fun sort of way to start off our first ever issue. Yeah.
A labour of love. So did that put you off, or in any way? What was the initial feedback of that first episode? You said about being different to the club in that day and age. Was there pushback from the club? Was there a little bit of, you can't be saying this or that, or was you left to it by the club? Like,
Pretty much, pretty much. The club sort of, they certainly at the start, never said you couldn't do that. It was quite a good first issue. I think offhand we had about 300 printed, and we sold pretty much all of them, so it was quite well received. I think obviously as well, no, that will come onto it, but the sales wise was always better in those days because, as we said, there was no social media then, there were no fans trust. So, for an independent view of the club that you love, you bought a fanzine. Whether or not you agreed with us, if you wanted that independent view aside from the program and, club call was going then, I suppose that was one of the only social media type outlets of a club. You bought a fanzine. So we were quite well received with it. I think, not being big headed, we had quite a bit of respect from other fans, knowing that our sort of little group did travel up and down the country. So it wasn't like a group of fans that never made games. We sort of, it took off and went from strength to strength from there.
So going, as I say, going to games, I would always buy a program. I don't know why now. I've still got crates and crates of programs up the loft. I don't know why I've kept them. I'm not sure my boy's going to be as happy to receive them as I off my granddad and my dad. But I always like to buy an independent fanzine. And when I think about like how I got into fanzines, it was When Saturday Comes, and I remember when that was at the start. I think that maybe started late 80s or whatever it was. But all of a sudden, that went from a smaller publication to, like, I remember going to W.H. Smith's as a kid and buying When Saturday Comes, and it went from, black and white to colour and then subscriptions. Were they sort of the flag bearers as such that, I know they had a slight attachment to England a little bit, but were they sort of like the flag bearers of the fanzine world back then? And then, as I say, all the clubs tried to, do their own one and improve over time?
Yeah, from what I remember, Christian, that was sort of like, there's actually been very few sort of national, type fanzines, and they did start very much as a fanzine. I think obviously now when you buy When Saturday Comes, almost unfortunately, if you ask me, they've been gone too professional. It's become
Yeah.
more like a magazine rather than a
100%.
fanzine.
Yeah.
And I think there are a number of fanzines that actually done that. To me, I'm sort of a bit more old school in my thinking. Is that actually, if a fanzine has a spelling mistake or almost like a page out of line or whatever, that's a fanzine. It shouldn't almost be a full glossy, color sort of thing, because obviously then it's almost sort of replicating the program, if you like.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think When Saturday Comes was very much a front runner for a lot of club fanzines, and certainly in the early 90s, you look in When Saturday Comes, they used to have a list of all the club fanzines
Yeah.
right at the back on their last page, and there must have been 200, 300, 400 fanzines going, and several clubs with two, maybe even three or four all going. So I think, like I say, they were definitely the catalyst for club people, doing their own fanzines, and it's still good to see When Saturday Comes going. But like I say, it's I wouldn't say I buy it occasionally now, but I wouldn't say it was as sort of cutting edge as a fanzine as it used to be. No.
And I agree with that. Starting this podcast, people said to me, "Are you going to get a studio? You're going to do this? You're going to do that?" And I was like, "Well, no. I want to speak to people that are involved with the game on
Yeah.
a level that I like, or that it resonates with me." And that's a great point, because, as I say, I can't tell you the last time I bought When Saturday Comes, because for me it's
Yeah.
just turned into another 442, and as you say, more magazine type publication. So you've started the fanzine, you labor of love. You've got the first episode out. How did that grow then, from having you and four pals to editor, not editors, sorry, contributors and other people sending in work to put in the fanzine? How did you grow that over the first couple of years?
Quite hard, actually, Chris, because I know 91, and a few people think, oh, 91, but if you go back to about 91, like I say, no social media, mobile phones were around, but certainly not the mobile phones we know these days. So literally, if we wanted content, it was a case of, yeah, okay. I mean, even email was around then, but was sort of still quite primitive. So I can still remember having several articles come through, typed up, and it would be in the post. And again, there's a little bit of, to me, that's quite nice. Actually receiving a letter in the post with a stamp on it, wrote to Pandemonium, not my name on it, sent to my old address in North London, and actually opening it up and getting an article. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, it's fantastic, whatever I get. I've always said, whether someone writes to me regularly or has only sent in one letter in 33 years, I'm so grateful, because to me, it's no good me and me and say two other mates writing it every week, every month, because your writing style will be very much the same. A fanzine for the fans is only as good as the amount of content we get, and it's great to have an Orient fan that might want to be overly critical, might want to be a real happy clappy, if you like, and won't have a word said against the club. And if you can get that mixture, and we did quite quickly, we actually picked up another regular writer within about 4 issues, and then we had, on top of the sort of 2 or 3 people that were writing for me that were my mates, within around about a season, we had 5 or 6 regular contributors. So it was, and that makes it far easier for me as well, because get the articles in, type them up, and plus an editorial from me and maybe a little bits and pieces here and there, and then that was my job done as an editor. So it makes it far easier if people are sending me their thoughts and different things. So it was, like I say, we were quite well received, and I really enjoyed all the articles we used to receive. Yeah.
Has it always been something that you've done on a monthly basis? And how would you say, what is your sort of timetable to get an episode out? Like, how does the week or the month play out for you for getting in that work to get it to the ground to sell outside, or on away days? Or how do you plan your time to get that done?
Yeah. So, I mean, these days, to be fair, much, much easier, advent of computers and social media. So, regular article writers now for me, of which I've got four from the last couple of seasons. They all sort of know the deadlines. I'll give them a deadline of when I need it in, which is usually a Sunday before a Monday night. It goes into print on a Monday, and will then be sort of ready for me to pick up from the printer on a Thursday or Friday. So the regular contributors will have a deadline from me. And to be fair, Christian, it's a reasonably easy job these days. They send the article through on a Word document or their chosen sort of platform. And of course, these days it's literally a copy and paste job. I might have to sort of mess around with font sizes every now and again because obviously, they know roughly what sort of word count equals 2 or 3 pages per issue. They might have a particular photo they want attached to the article. So again, that will be a copy and a paste off the internet. So, the life of a fanzine editor these days, when people say, how long does it take? To be honest, it doesn't take that long. Over a month, probably takes no more than around about 10 or 12 hours. Right. My printer is fantastic. I've been with my current printer around about 13, 14 years now. They are fantastic. Last year, I was waiting on 2 articles and I ended up giving them the fanzine on a Thursday afternoon and he still had it ready for me on Friday afternoon because I'm a regular customer. So, that's great because obviously if you put it out that you do have a deadline and one coming out, the biggest problem these days, Christian, is trying to plan, can I bring it out for sort of 2 home games in a row or, have we got a cup game coming up and that sort of thing. I don't go to as many away games now, but I will go to a lot of the local games and that can be a real big bonus. It's obviously, whereas you're selling it at a home game, I've got to cover 4 stands. At an away game, Charlton, classic example, second game of the season, we'll have maybe 2,000 people there, but they'll all be going in one entrance. Yeah. So every Orient fan has got to pass me. And hopefully if I can, whether they're a regular reader, I can wear them down. There's a sale there. So, it doesn't take too long. Yeah, a bit of a labour of love. There have been the odd stressful night where the old age, sort of, I think with most fanzine editors, the old age joke used to be was trying to come up with front covers, which are usually, it's usually as a jovial thing or a big news story. But of course, it's hitting that front cover right to try and catch people's attention. So there are many times, I can say, over the years where I've been burning the midnight oil and up till 3 o'clock in the morning staring at a blank screen and what front cover can I do this month? No, I did that 6 months ago, or I did that joke a year ago. So, occasionally it'll be a case of what can I do this month? And then you'll get a light bulb moment at 3:30 in the morning, and there we go.
So you've touched on a little bit there, Matt. Would you say that obviously times have massively changed in regards to just the way we live our life and communicate, and especially from your, should we say, fanzine point of view, it's become a lot easier for you to get copies together and publications together. What would you say is, because I suppose if I asked you 30 odd years ago if you'd still think it'd be running now, the answer would probably be no, right? But so how?
Yes, definitely, yeah.
How has it stood the test of time? Because things have massively changed now. Like, as you say, internet changed the world. As you say, you used to type out on a typewriter. People can now write that on their phone and PDF it and send it off. So also, obviously, it's made your life easier, but at the same time, has that made selling a fanzine a lot more difficult? Because, for instance, Twitter, I only really use Twitter because for sport, for football, for Orient, for non-league, for England, having that information readily available at your fingertips, is it sort of a two-edged sword? The test of time has made,
you're
it's
totally
made it
right.
a lot easier for you, but you're not maybe getting the same buy-in or coverage that you used to get.
Yeah, totally right, Christian. It's so much easier to produce, but on the online world, you have quite a few just only online fanzines. I would actually, I keep saying it every year, and I've said it for about 5 years. I would love to produce an online issue so that subscriptions can be bought where it's cheaper instead of me having to post out.
Yeah.
However, saying that, you still get quite a few traditionalists that would like a paper copy fanzine. So I think it's a case of, I mean, if tomorrow when we're at home to Bolton, if I took a snapshot of, say, 50 Leighton Orient 16 to 18-year-old O's fans, if I said, what's a fanzine, they'd look at you blankly. They wouldn't have a clue. What is a fanzine? It's a magazine that Orient fans write that's unofficial. And of course, if they're interested, I think the next question you get is, well, can I get it online? Can I read it on my computer? So sales-wise, yes, it's taken a hit. But obviously, take with one hand, give with the other. I now spend a lot less time producing it. So you have to sort of, go with the rough, go with the smooth, if you like.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a great point there, because you talking through that to me just makes me think of programs, right? There's been a number of teams over the last few years that have gone to, say, like a digital copy of a program, but the older generation, me included, would still want to go. If I hadn't been to that ground, for instance, or it was an important game or whatever it was, I would still want to buy that in my hand and have it, and the geek that I am, put it up the loft and save it for my son or whatever. But do you think you'll get to a point where you'd have to produce, if it carried on, say, for another 30 years, where you'd have to move online, or offer like a hybrid solution where the older generation you print off and the younger generation might read it online? Is that something that you can see happening? Or yeah, what do
Yeah,
you think on that?
100%. I mean, if we want to sort of, we always say, Christian and me as the editor, I've never done this a money making issue, because it doesn't make enough money to, sort of provide any sort of income. It's a little bit of a bonus on every month, that might pay for them, pay towards the season ticket or whatever. So, but if we want to sort of retain a number of people reading it, I think almost certainly I've got to sort of bite the bullet a little bit. I must admit, my IT skills are okay, but I'm not that IT minded. But I almost think, yeah, certainly that within the next couple of years, I'm almost certainly going to have some sort of online presence outside of social media, along with the old traditional paper fanzine that, hopefully people will still want to buy at the ground on a Saturday.
Sure. And so on a Saturday, for instance, talk about home game tomorrow, home to Bolton for Leighton Orient. What's your daily schedule on a games? Do you get there early, and is it just yourself, or how do you go about selling that fanzine on a match day?
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe, if you like, at the moment, is that whilst I've got some fantastic contributors with the fanzine, with the articles, I am still the only person that actually sells the fanzine. Now, I did have a guy that used to sit in the East Stand. He still goes. He helped me sell for around about 4 or 5 seasons, but gave up a couple of years ago. One of my best mates always sells, but only ever the last ever issue. We might only have one home game to bring it out, but it is literally just me. So, it can be really quite difficult for one person, because obviously I can only ever be in one place. So I usually get to the game hour and a half, 2 hours before kickoff time, trying to pick up any sort of people in and around the ground early. So for Bolton, this mad 5:30 kickoff Saturday tomorrow, I'll probably be there around about 3:30, 3:45. We'll set outside the club shop till about 10 minutes before kickoff time, keeping an eye on the queue. Whenever it's busy, have to rush in. And then what I tend to do is I'll sell for a couple of home games. Luckily enough, the club are very good. They provide me a ground pass. and it allows me to gain access to other stands and can sell at half time. So what I'll tend to do is I'll sort of do the south stand at half time in one game, and then the second home game, if you like, I'll sort of cover the north and the east stand. So that is a massive bonus, because if I couldn't get around the ground, I'd probably be almost giving it up, Christian, because I just would not sell enough copies. So that's to be fair, it's a real bonus that the club allow me to do that.
That's good to hear. So Matt, if we look back and think about your time writing your fanzine, what would you say was? I'll start with the front cover, because, as I say, when I had to think back this morning before we had this conversation around fanzines, and it was always, as you say, that front cover really caught your attention. And as you say, it was normally a piss take of the current situation or something that happened. What would you say is like your favourite front cover in your time at the fanzine?
Right. Well, we had two ones that, if I'd have been produced these days, I'd have been in a lot of trouble. So you've got the third ever issue, I think, or the fourth ever issue. It was around about a couple of weeks after the O's had played Brentford at Brisbane Road back in the early 90s. And for any Orient fans listening, they're probably going to remember which game it was. We beat Brentford 4-2. Brentford was one of those London rivals we could never beat. We never turned them over. They beat us every home and away. And we finally got one over on them. But we had a referee called David Ellery, who no doubt you will have heard of, and obviously others, ex-Premier League referee, who was going up the levels at that time. And it was actually turned the Battle of Brisbane Road, because there was a massive 20-man brawl. Steve Castle, Terry Howard, Kenny Atchambong, Terry Evans for Brentford, a guy called Lee Luscombe. Everyone was in there chucking punches. And it was actually Kenny Atchambong for the O's who got sent off. The subsequent video on YouTube showed that, probably modern day football, there could have been about 5 or 6 gone from either side. So, but the really funny story was me being a referee, and actually my county was Middlesex at that point. David Ellery was also Middlesex. Now, because this was actually before the advent of online and social media, every referee used to get a county handbook. And would you believe it? It used to have referees' addresses and phone numbers in there. And what possessed me, I don't know. But I actually printed David Ellery's address and phone number on the front cover. And the story goes that he actually received some phone calls from Leighton Orient fans, sort of not too threatening, I don't think, but put it this way, no one ever, well, they found out now, but no one ever found out at the time. And I think had people found out, I think the fanzine would have been closed down. I think I'd have been struck off the referees list, and I might have found myself in a Crown Court in North London somewhere. So that was certainly one of the sort of favourite front covers, and certainly one of the probably more risque ones that any fanzine's ever done. So, but like I say, these days, I don't think you can get away with that these days. No chance.
Oh, could you imagine that now? That is some front cover. And then what about like an article or contribution? What do you think either, got the most attention, or sold out the fanzine in record time because of that article?
Obviously the Becchetti years we did quite well, because we went after Francesco from 6 months in. There was some critical stuff that was sort of well rounded, but there was some really I say nasty, but obviously, for any Orient fans listening, and I think most football fans know the story of Francesco Becchetti at Orient over the 3 years where we got relegated. We had a fantastic writer, and would you believe, to this day, I still don't know who the guy was, because he used to send it in anonymously. He used to call it the Sunday Spurt, which obviously was a play on the Sunday Sport, that beacon of the press, if you like, on a Sunday. and they used to write some really, really funny. I mean, the guy probably should have been a stand-up comedian. In fact, I've got a stand-up comedian, does it part-time now, who writes for me now. But this guy was a really, really funny guy. And thinking back, it was one of the articles that I probably had a hell of a lot of people say, what a really, really clever article. Now, we're going back to the early 90s when actually in the old West Side of Orient, there were quite a few ejections. We're going back to policing in the 80s and 90s. Didn't have much of a sort of a reason to chuck people out, if you like, pick someone up by the scruff of the collar and lob them out for whatever reason. And this guy wrote an article stating that the Leighton police were playing a dastardly game of snooker. And the way it worked was that several police officers, what they did was that you'd pick someone in a red coat or a red orange shirt, obviously reasonably good chance. So you chuck someone out in a red, and then what you do is you go for a colour on the snooker table. So you pick up someone in a black jacket. And he made this article about, PC, someone or other, managed an excellent 47 break last year or last week or whatever. And it was such a fantastically written article. But what a concept, what a great, and some people actually said to me, I think they actually thought it was almost real. And then looking at the West Side, when games are going on, oh, there's a guy got out in red. Oh, the policeman's going for someone in a yellow or a blue. So it was, what a really, really sort of clever way to make a really jokey article, to take the mickey out of the police, but in a nice way. And that one, we had so many people sort of, what an amazingly funny article. What an idea. What a concept to come up with. It was great. It was brilliant. So I don't quite, probably wasn't true, but I think there were that many people lobbed out of the West Side in the 80s and early 90s. If they were doing it, some policemen made some big breaks.
So we've touched on how the past and the greatest episodes and greatest front cover, and we've touched on it a little bit. But how do you see the future of the fanzine, Matt? How do you see yourself into the future still doing this, or could you pass this over to someone else? How do you see the next couple of years, for instance, of your fanzine?
That's the thing, Christian, is that I have two sons and a daughter. One son, the oldest, is a Leyton Orient fan, but sort of has no passion to take it over. My other son is a Brentford fan. My girlfriend is a Brentford fan. He chose Brentford, unfortunately. So, and he's an aspiring referee anyway, so he won't be taking it over. And my daughter, while she's a football fan, won't be doing it. So this is the sort of problem I have, is that I've been asked several times about will I give it up, and it's almost if we have a bad season or I've had a season, is it time to give it up? But it's one of those things you can't give it up, and I've joked with my girlfriend about, are you going to be selling pandemonium when you're 80? I don't think anyone will ever take it over. So I think I've got a mind, let's maybe 33rd season, let's get to a milestone 35th in 2 years, and then let's see we go from there. But, you said before, could I still have seen it going, 30 years ago in 30 years? No. Could I still see myself doing it when I'm 80? Could be, but, I think probably not. I think at 80, Christian, I don't think I'll get around the ground quick enough to sell enough copies. So, we'll play it by ear. And but I think, put it this way, look, it would actually be a really sad day for me, for Leyton Orient Football Club and for fanzines when a 30-plus-year-old fanzine, has to give up. But unfortunately, all good things will come to an end at some point, and let's keep on going until that point comes.
I think that's a great way to be. I think you've hit the nail on the head, but also, like you touched on, it's part of your identity, right? It's part of, like, it's been it's been with you so long that it's part of your monthly routine, right? So to not do that would probably leave a big gap in your life. So I totally get that. You touched on a little bit that you're a ref, and I know you do a lot of stuff for Leyton Orient and around the community and at the ground. What do you think you'll do longer? Will you ref or the fanzine?
Oh, good question. What holds out first? Me typing on a keyboard on my legs. I think actually reffing might outstay it on the basis that I'm maybe not going to be fit enough and to chase around under 18s or mid 20-year-olds in a Sunday league in a couple of years' time. However, I could, drop down and do a lovely bit of youth football, under 7s, under 8s on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning. So I think, yeah, let's go with the reffing. The reffing might outsee the fanzine, I think.
And then before we close this out, Matt, obviously, this will go out probably after tomorrow, but it's first game in the season tomorrow, so probably you probably look at that, right, as your most important sort of publication of the season. What's in the fanzine tomorrow? What have you focused on for your first episode this season?
Okay, so we have quite a big spread in the middle, a 12-page spread looking at League One. And something I've never done before is I've got the views of other fanzines, other teams' fanzines and podcasts and message boards. So I think that's something I've never done before, which will be quite interesting. We have, as we always do right at the start of the season, which I think is always quite interesting for, like I say, you've used the word a couple of times, you as a geek. And I think it's a geeky type thing, but people like to see it. And it's a roundup of where a lot of our ex-players are now. And then, boy, there are some strange clubs, people in Lithuania and, some very small non-league teams and that type of thing. So we always do a quick roundup of that. Like I say, we have a resident comedian, stand-up comedian, who's actually performing at the Edinburgh Fringe. He's got a lovely topical take on England's, well, call it success or failure, call it what you like, at the Euros. He's always a great article to read. And then all the other little bits and pieces, a little bit of a cartoon, a little bit of a joke, the odd pop at West Ham and Southend. And then, my editorial and a couple of other contributors' articles makes up, I think it's 30, what we got? Yeah, 12, 32, 36 pages coming out tomorrow. So hopefully, as I always say, although I'm a little bit biased, I still think that's well worth a quid of anyone's money.
I was just about to say, is it still £1? That's unbelievable value in this day and age, especially like to say you talk about being a football geek, an article on ex-players where they're playing across the world. That's the sort of thing I buy a fanzine for. So, Matt, I really appreciate your time. It's been brilliant to talk to you. As I say, fanzines have been part of my football life, part of my enjoyment, going to the games, reading on trains home, the day after. I think it's a proper sort of love of football goers. So just to finish off, I want to thank you for your time. But if you could just tell the listeners where they could get a copy of your fanzine and how they can purchase it if they don't go to the ground or they're not a Leyton Orient fan.
Yeah, okay. So if you're at the ground, obviously I can relieve you of a quid outside the West Stand before and after games or around the ground at half time. If anyone would like a subscription or a one-off copy by post, if they email me on pandafanzine1881@gmail.com. So that's pandafanzine1881@gmail.com, or track me down under Panda Fanzine on Twitter or Facebook.
Matt, that's amazing. As I say, absolutely brilliant. Credit to you and your team that is still going. I look forward to being back in the UK and buying one myself. And just thanks for your time and just keep going. And I hope to have this conversation another 10 years speaking about your fans.
Fantastic. I'd look forward to it.
Thanks again, mate. All the best. Good luck for the season.